Hello, everyone. This is Lee Andrews with Akathame, and today we're going to talk about what I believe could be a sensitive subject for some people, but a very curious one for people like me. While I am not a UX practitioner, I am very active with the UX community in representing UX candidates as well as working with leaders within the UX community. And so as a person on that side of the desk, from a recruiting standpoint, for me, it's become very, very confusing about what UX is, what are the roles, where does it sit in an organization, who does it report to, and what's its level of accountability and impact on an organization. When I first started getting into it in 2010, it was very specialized, sat as a solo, maybe tag team with IT or an offshoot of IT, but now it has been dispersed throughout organizations. And so I brought the expert's expert in to talk about UX trends around the functions and the role within this capacity. And let me introduce to you Dr. Nick Fine. He has a degree in human capital. I said that. Yeah, human-computer interaction. I'm so much on the human capital side. And Dr. Nick is actually a practicing user experience strategist and designer. He works with companies all over the world, so he is in the thick of it. And then we've got future doctoral candidate, Darren Hood, who is also a practitioner, currently working as a consultant within the UX domain. He is also an adjunct professor at Kent State University. I feel as though we have two people who can look at it from the two sides of user experience. One is the academic side, purely academic side, and looking at it from an overall impact without being so personally tied to it. So they're looking at all of the facts and the data around this particular practice. And at the other side, they have the passion of the practitioner. So I can't imagine living inside their heads.
It's messy.
Yes, it is. I can imagine that it's messy. And so as I'm hearing more requirements that confuse me as a recruiter and so many candidates looking for work, they want researchers, but they only want a certain degree. So now you've got these homogenized roles of research, testing, design, development, all in one. And then functions, you hear the what's the word I want to use? The process, if you will, of lean UX, and then you've got agile, and then you've got all these other things tacked onto it. So it's no wonder we're not all confused. So let's start with the very first thing. I'm going to allow each of these individuals to introduce themselves if I miss something about them, but we're going to head right into it. When you discuss user experience with companies of various sizes, what's their perception of UX? Do you have to shift it? Do you have to massage it? Or do they get it? So, Dr. Nick, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So what a company's perception of UX, or what do they believe it to mean, can literally vary from contract to contract, gig to gig, brand to brand. And it really doesn't matter about the maturity of the organization as to their UX maturity. I mean, there are some very mature organizations out there, large, huge organizations whose UX maturity is really low, and others who are, startups who have got radical maturity. So, and everything in between. So it really is. I cannot give you I'll give you an example, and I hope Darren can back me up, or anybody else that's watching this. We're definitely seen as problem solvers. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But people throw us solutions to often prettify, where many people misconceive us as a elite form of design or a specialist form of design.
Yes.
And for many parts of the world, many parts of UX, that is unfortunately the conception of user experience, is of a visual design thing. It's primarily led by visual design and interaction design. Less so around the researchy part, the user-centric bit. Now, that's probably really harsh and a massive generalization, but if you put a gun on my head and say, what does the world think of UX? I'm going to say something around wireframing and making it look nice. because you know what I mean. That's just
wait a minute, Dr. Nick. Let me just make sure I understand. This really made my head hurt. Back in 2010, when I learned how to spell UX, I was very lucky to have worked with what still are today some of the great UX design leaders in the domain, but you don't hear about them because they don't like to broadcast it. They just quietly move in that space. But I was taught very early on that this has nothing to do with the aesthetics. It has to do with how the human works within that product to get what they need. Yes. And there's a component of the aesthetic, but that is not, there's a component of that, which is the visual design, but the visual design matters not if the person can't use the product. Is that?
You know what? I see Darren nodding furiously, and it's hard to disagree with that. However, for the audience that's listening and for what we're kind of projecting or putting out there, UX really is about both. It's about research and design. I don't want to put one above the other. I don't think that's appropriate to generalize that way. I think what the really important thing is, it's research and design together. At the moment, it's much more tilted in the design bit. And it's just a rebalancing that we need to see happen to bring research in to sort of balance the scale. That's my perspective.
I totally agree. Matter of fact, I'll jump in there and say, I like to describe it as the art and the science of design. And a lot of people in that presentation layer, I think about Jesse James Garrett's old classic 5 Planes, where I think that we spend most of our time in the first 4. We are concerned about the presentation layer. We're concerned about how it looks, because how it looks does impact how it gets used. But if those first 4 planes are not handled properly, to the point that was already made, it can look fantastic, but if nobody can use it, what's it really worth? And I think about Don Norman's old quip, how that things that are prettier, people think that they work better. It's still true today. And what it is that people tolerate something that looks good when it doesn't work well. If we defend the ethics of UX properly, if we represent the ethics of UX properly, we want things to look great. We do, but we want them to work great first. And we can always fix the look. We can always make it look better. There are talented people out there, much more talented than your standard UX person, that can make things look fantastic. But if we can marry the art and the science, everybody wins. The user wins, the business wins, UX wins. Unfortunately, most companies see us as, hey, go make it look better. That's the dilemma.
Is that because is economics driving this? This is where I'm missing it. Is economics driving this? Is ignorance driving this? Or is there a certain industry leader that's driving this? Like, is an industry really
this one, Dr. Nick,
watering it down?
I think there are several factors. I think that a lot of people still don't know what UX is. There's a lot of the talks I do, I always like to share this one history slide. I don't know if either of you have seen any of my decks. And there's this one history slide where I talk about how that around the .com bust, when everybody was inundating us with their splash screens and things of that nature and driving everybody nuts, they finally realized that we needed to be focused on the user. That's when the shift really started, around 1999, 2000, 2001. And then the research was done by IBM and NASA. I like to list this as a major milestone in the world of UX. When they did the research and talked about for every dollar you invest, you get X return. Prior to that, most of the UX positions were more so in the creative agency. You didn't regularly find, we were information architects back then, most of us, and interaction designers. We were not, the UX didn't become mainstream part of the title until at least 2004, 2005. Once that research came out, the corporations wanted their part of that. And so they wanted to, we need UX people. I actually got hired at a company once that said that they needed a UX person. And that decision I later found out was made in literally 5 seconds. But nobody knew. And I left in about 5 seconds too after I found it out. At any rate, I am not afraid to leave, as my profile will show you. However, companies wanted to bring UX on board. They never bothered to find out what UX really was. And so those assumptions and those biases led the way. And that leads us to where we are, which is still going on today. The Wild Wild West.
Let me just fill in a little bit of history there, Darren. After that, so I call it like the UX gold rush. So UX is born around 2002, 2003, around 2004, 2005, 2006. There's this huge gold rush because for those of us that have been working in it beforehand, sorry, the gold rush was, I get my years wrong. Sorry, it was around 2015, thereabouts. I've been working since 2010 or 2009 for about 5 years and getting it all embedded. And there was just, the UX consultant classic role, research into design. So I was a researcher and a designer. But then this gold rush happened, right? Where suddenly the design world, like art directors, creative directors, visual designers, industrial product designers, recruiters, product managers, product leads, you name it, everybody suddenly wanted to become UX. And so we see this huge influx because they learned that there was this UX thing that had been growing, and we got to a critical mass or big enough that we got noticed. And suddenly the whole design world goes, wait a minute, you're doing design. That's my job. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. And UX feels really arty and creative and that kind of really experiential quality to it. And any creative, any designer's like, dude, you're in my house, get out. And that's kind of what has been happening is we've had this kind of civil war that is still raging between UX UI and real UX. Now, UX UI,
I like that.
They hate me, and that's never going to change. So I'm going to speak freely because I just don't care. UX UI is the label that they gave themselves for a designer type coming in and doing UX because they have all the UI skills and all the visual skills that kills any UX person. And they've come in and gone, right, I want to do the UX thing, but I'm going to put the UX/UI because it speaks to my core competency. And so we've now got this huge world of UX UI, which is basically visual designers. You can go through LinkedIn and look at them backwards, and you'll see graphic design school, art school. It's all the same every time. Or somebody's gone through one of the
boot camps,
university education programs, which are of questionable quality, and done the same thing and call themselves UX UI. So UX UI is the back door into our world. But again, speaking to both of your points, it meant that UX is being defined by people who haven't joined the party. They're interpreting it and practicing it and telling people what it is when they haven't spoken to the existing world. So the new school is redefining UX whilst we're still doing it. And that's the problem.
Yes. I actually marked that. I did a talk in 2014 for Vitamin T, sponsored that. Vitamin T and Ackman sponsored it. And I had 5 minutes to talk about the 10 things that we learned about UX in 2013. I'll jump straight to the point. Number one, you can see this deck on SlideShare. Number one was the rise of the poser. So I marked that in 2013. Same exact thing Dr. Nick was just talking about, that you had this massive influx of people that were getting involved in UX. I actually have 3 classifications. The poser, the person who says they're a UX person, they absolutely are not by any stretch of anyone's imagination. You have the retrofit, a person who was doing something else that they just slapped the UX title on them and just tried to grow them in UX, but they're still learning what it is. I've seen some retrofits be successful. The vast majority I see are not. There is the upstart. The person is just doing anything they can to get in. The people who have, you just described them, what I would call the upstarts. They've taken their resume. They've been doing things for 10 or 15 years. They do not have any formal UX experience, but they retrofitted their entire resume to make it look like they've been doing UX for 10 years.
Yep, 100%.
Then they qualify for the positions, and they don't want to, frankly, I'm going to be talking about this with Debbie on Monday, they don't like interacting with people like me and Dr. Nick. Because when we start talking about what UX really is, it exposes them, and it makes the workplace hostile. And that's why I was glad that you referred to it as a war. It is a war. And we're not fighting it. I'm trying to grow everybody I come into contact with. But that's going on. So I marked 2013 as when I noticed ramping up.
So let me just make sure I get this right. UX had become so sexy that everybody wanted in.
Yes.
Right? It was like crack. You know, when I was getting in it, it was like crack for a company. we got to have the UX. And people realized that their income could rise because of UX. What I saw back then is people coming into UX from one of two areas. Either the technology, they came up from IT technology, because in technology, they had been doing this user experience. They might have called it something different, but they've been doing exhaustive research and testing in hardware and software for decades, right? So they would likely move into the digital design and UX design capacity from that end, or they were coming from the creative side, from art directors, creative directors, and seniors designers. So now with these two minds meeting, some of those on the engineering and IT side have really caught on to this research and testing, while others haven't from the creative side. So yeah, I can see where the confusion's coming from. I really want to talk about, let's get to some solutions here as well, right? What can we do to get this on the right path? But in order to get there, I think we still need to look at what the challenges are. So the next part, so we talked about the labor categories. We talked about the capability of UX being really rooted in research and testing. Let's talk about where the function typically fits within various organizations. Where does it sit? Who does it report to? What are the trends you're seeing there now?
That's a good question. So this comes down to centralization and decentralization all over again. And it really, again, I'm going to give you the generalist answer, because it really is horses for courses, i.e. what fits, what's right for the organization. In an agile world, typically, there's a UX person in every pod, on every team, along with every other role, and that works really well. But what also you kind of need is a kind of a cross-functional, I don't want to use a horrible business word, that kind of matrix, so that you've got a centralization as well as people sitting in their pods, so that there's a guild or something like that of UXers, so that you can get together, compare notes, share insight, share learnings and failings, and all the good stuff as a UX practice, but as well as living with the development team, living with your product manager or owner, and actually doing the heavy lifting, the actual product or project work itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Different organizations. I mean, there's so many organizations out there, and a lot of people try to come up with a cookie cutter type of approach, but you really can't, because there's too many organizations. So some who sit in IT, I currently sit in IT at my current job. In the past, I've sat in a strategy group, which that was actually the best operation that I ever had for UX to be part of strategy. It was just labeled strategy. I've seen product strategy groups. I thought that worked well. So it can vary. I don't think there's one right place per se. I have found, however, in my observation, that being in IT a lot of times is the most volatile, because there's always, people won't, quote unquote, stay in their own lane, so to speak. And I know some people don't like that, but that's where you have a lot of the more combative type of operation, where there's a developer, I call them closet designers. A lot of developers want to design, but let's face it, you don't really know. You don't really know. You don't know heuristics. You don't know who Jesse James Garrett is. You don't know the rule. You don't know what a persona is. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, and they just do things off the cuff and really don't like the standard UX approach, whatever approach someone takes is. So at any rate, though, again, it can vary. It can vary. The question is, no matter where you are you allowed to practice real UX? That's the bigger challenge.
So I'm seeing that there's not a consistent voice for UX. So there's a consistent voice for medical practitioners who are specialists in eye care or hearing, right? There are specialists in, legal, and, even CPAs there's no doubt in my mind what an accountant does. And when they become certified accountants, where they become a CFO, there's no doubt in my mind what that does. It seems to me, from my observations, that UX has an identity crisis.
Yes.
And there somehow needs to be a defining line that says this is UX. There is no wishy-washiness about it. I mean, I'm living in nirvana, right? I know that.
Yeah. Those days are gone, Lee.
I think it can happen. And I think that it's going to take, the reason that I bring this up, and I'm going to step on all kinds of toes with this, but my concern is that the leadership, who's training, who's leading this, what message are they sending that says, don't forsake the core of what we do as a practice for economics, because you wouldn't do that for a brain surgeon. You wouldn't do that.
Yes.
Why would we do? And does user experience, these are all these questions that keep me up at night. Does user experience articulate the impact of negative practices within the organization? If we are not doing UX correctly, what is the negative impact? Where are those case studies? That's what I want to see. And those are the conversations that I want to have with senior leaders of organizations. I mean, my face is getting red now because I'm an end user, guys. You know, I've got you two leaders and vocalists about this on the phone, and I'm the lowest common denominator of an end user you will ever get. on whatever product it is, whether it's a doorknob or a website. I mean, I am your lowest common denominator, but I am self-aware. What also concerns me is that we've got leaders who are unaware in the UX domain of the impact that they're having on diluting this practice, which leads me to things like everybody in a company is a designer. And I'm going to ask you about this, and I'm going to tell you a story. I worked with a brilliant creative director who was formerly at Dell. He would probably be very embarrassed if I said his name right now, but he was trying to work within his org, not in a UX capacity, but he was trying to get Dell, to all employees, to think more creatively. He wasn't trying to get them to become designers. He wasn't trying to get them to sign up for user experience. He was just trying to open their minds to think more creatively. Is that design thinking? Is that the intention of design thinking? I mean,
design thinking is a whole, we can spend another hour talking about design thinking and what does it actually really mean? I mean, you're talking about divergent and convergent thinking and double diamonds and all that stuff. Great. But I think it gets majorly overplayed. But just before we go on, there are 3 really quick points I want to make on what you just said, Lee, if that's okay.
Sure.
First of all, about the accountants, qualified, chartered, certified, all of that good stuff. When you give your accountant your tax return, or you go to a neurologist or somebody, they are qualified, certified, because they're doing something very serious. And if they get it wrong, there's big things. The same should be true of research in particular, because what we do feeds the entire product funnel. And if you get it wrong, it's garbage from here on out. So that's number one. So why don't we have some kind of qualified, certified researcher role? And that's where the PhD comes in. Now, I'm not going elitist, and I'm not saying everyone's going to have a PhD. That's completely garbage. But we have science, we have a structure for learning, we have psychology in terms of learning human behavior. That's where this comes into play. If you're going to put research and learning about behavior and needs of our users, it should be in a safe pair of hands, and that is somebody who has been trained to study human behavior. And that means we need to get all the psychologists in the world to help train everybody else, because they've got all that knowledge. That's number one. Number two, about management and misleading people. There's a kind of a impetus, there's a force that drives certain kinds of personas or people to want to become very senior very quickly. And the people who genuinely are passionate and love UX don't go up, because we love talking to people like Darren, right? We could be sitting in management roles very easily, but we choose to be practitioners because we love being practitioners. I love products. I love talking to people. I love behavior. I wouldn't be a psychologist if I didn't. And so the people that tend to go up to management are people who want to be managers, not people who get love and are passionate about UX. And that's the problem. And then when you've got somebody who's risen fast and doesn't really know, they're reliant upon their recruiter. Now, this is where I'm going to pee everybody off. Recruiters, as you well know, Lee, at some places are much like, not sweatshops, but the pipeline is much like an agency. It's really, really pressured. It's very, very numbers driven. And people are there they've got numbers, quotas to fill. If somebody at big brand says, I want a person, and you've got somebody and they go, great, I'll take them, even though they're the wrong person, you've met your quota, and the client's happy and you're happy. And I've spoken to a number of recruiters who I won't ever think of naming, who are they're keeping their clients happy, but that's not the right thing for the industry. And that's the real crux of the problem here. Is we need to empower recruiters and educate them and help them to be able to turn these people who are recruiting to say, actually, what you think you want isn't quite right. What you really want is this. So that's basically that's kind of what I wanted to say, because there's so many mechanics going on that I've observed over the past 10 years. And that's one of them. That was one of the first ones, is watching people go to management who haven't really spent any time as a practitioner. And that's a massive problem for something it is experientially based.
Right. So business stakeholders defining what a practice is. It's amazing that those business stakeholders aren't defining what the CFO does, or defining there's no question about that CFO role and the accounting function. What have we done to allow this to happen? Darren, what about you on that one?
Yeah, two things that come to mind for me, two things that stood out from a leadership standpoint. I heard someone, you may have seen a post I did on LinkedIn last week where we were talking about, someone mentioned the UX Collective. Who in the world is the UX Collective, and where did that come from? So we throw that out. What is UX leadership today? What can we really say? And I would say the people who've been around and established as leaders. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, I don't know what that was. Go ahead.
People who are established as leaders, who were on the front lines, I look at them as leaders, no matter what they're doing today. Number two, the educational institutions, which are still just getting the ball rolling to try to establish what UX really is and produce what I like to coin as the UXers of tomorrow. And then number three, you have the associations, the UX associated organizations such as the UXPA, ASSIST, Information Architecture Institute they're still a thing, I guess, even though they supposedly disbanded. We're not seeing leadership across these three. Schools are doing things, are all over the place. There's one school who I will not name. I conducted what I like to refer to as the quintessential ethnographic study, because when I have 2 UX related master's degrees, one from Kent State, one from Syracuse. And I didn't feel, I will say this about Syracuse, I did not feel that the courses that drew me to the program were offered online, which drove me to get the second master's degree. And I still feel today that Kent State was the best decision I ever made. Wow. From an standpoint, because what we did, what we were taught to do, what was presented was practical. I could learn something, be presented with something, and the next day put it to use at work. You can't get any more practical than that. And that level of practicality is missing across the educational, the learning experience landscape, the LX landscape, if you will. It's just flat out missing. People go to boot camps, you're dead in the water. Mm-hmm. It's about making money for them. Mm-hmm. Nobody can learn UX in 6 months. Those of us that are doing it didn't learn it in 6 months. You're not going to learn it in 6 months. And so that's just a cash grab. If you go to whatever school you go to get back to what I was about to mention, I went to one school that was highly rated as being one of the best UX programs out there. I found it completely impractical. Because it was a bisynchronous approach, you got exposed to all of the regular classroom politics, and I learned absolutely nothing. That I got out of there as fast as I could. I won't name them all. I went to 7 different schools. And different schools
to get what you believe you needed.
Yeah, I experienced them firsthand. I know that there are some people, that school's not doing this right. They're not doing that right. Absolutely. And I couldn't go to what was considered to be the best school because they required a per term residency. I don't have time. I don't have time to fly out to your campus to be in your face every. Right. So schools are doing things so differently. The curriculum, some curriculums are fantastic, but the way they execute them is good. Some schools have practitioners teaching the classes. Some schools don't. Just take them off and the MOOCs, just take them off of your the Udemy's and the Coursera's. You get exposed to UX? Yes. Yeah, you can. But they're promising people the world. They can't deliver that.
So as a trainer, again, trainer.
If I can throw it in there, Lee.
Sorry.
The leaders of the day,
them
have chased the buck. The love for the discipline, the dedication for the discipline, the ethics of the discipline is not there. And it's all about the buck. A lot of people today writing books. It's all about not Debbie. Debbie's book is fantastic. She's trying to present the integrity of the discipline. I can't say that about everyone. I know people that they get on LinkedIn and all they do is talk about their book. You can't talk to them about UX. It's all about the book. It's all about getting published. I know people who have basically they have curated content that they didn't write, and they're being hailed as some great UX mind.
Yep.
But the people following them aren't practicing anything, and they're not practicing anything.
And actually, that comes out at conference a few times as well. Where people just represent something from a textbook, which is crazy.
That's horrifying to me.
There's a really important part to make here. So we were talking about the definition of UX and the perception of it.
Yeah.
This is like the evolution of any industry. I mean, I was around before and during the introduction of the internet. So when the internet came out, I was an internet consultant way back in the day, where I was a security guy, a web designer, literally a systems engineer, database engineer, all of these things in one. As with any industry, as it evolves, it breaks down, becomes more specialist. So back in the day, Darren and I were UX consultants. We were researchers and designers, usually stronger in one than the other. Me, I had to learn design because I was all research. And that was a 5-year struggle for sure. And I'm still learning that. But it starts out now that it's moving on and it's evolving. And that definition of UX really is more as the audience have said, which is a shame. I disagree with it. For me, UX was always back in the old school about research into design, i.e. needs into solution, if you know what I mean, right?
Yep.
Today, that still happens, but it's a separated role. So user experience was all in one. User experience now is a corporate level kind of fluffy thing. And in practical applied terms, it is user research on one side and UX design or UX UI on the other side. There is some cases, and I think Debbie and I were talking about this, where in America and some markets, UX design is also research and design. So it gets messy.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, so we're going to be talking about UX in those fluffy terms, but when we talk about actual stuff, we're going to be talking about the practices of research and design. Do you see what I mean? And that's where the recruitment will come and the structuring of the teams throughout enterprises, because what are they actually doing? Because UX doesn't mean anything in those terms anymore. Right?
So let me tell you what I've heard from you two so far. I've heard that, first of all, I think we have to understand human behavior. We humans do not change unless they're aspired to change or unless they're in pain. And I think that user experience has been affected because companies felt financial burden and they didn't understand the practice of user experience. So when people who had their ear, when UX practitioners had the ear of these economic stakeholders and said, UX doesn't have to be expensive, UX doesn't have to do this or do that, we can start homogenizing and shortening the UX cycle to where it is today, to where it's almost completely blended, where there's almost no line between the research testing and the visual component. And that's what I see could be the root problem, is that it was driven by economics and by people who help those key stakeholders, economic stakeholders, improve their financial outcome. So that's I do want to get to some of the comments that are happening here. Alonso says, I've noticed that removing the word design from the sentence changes the notion entirely. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit, Alonso. Looks like Monica said other researchers coming from psychology and cognitive science. This is when we were talking about what is the background? How do we get into this human interaction domain? Alberto also says, when I say I'm doing research to define the requirement that this user profile finds value in, the mindset changes entirely and aesthetics is not even in the conversation. So that's what he was saying about design. So he doesn't even use the word design in that conversation. He focuses on that the user finds value. Is that making sense to you guys?
I think it does in general, I think, yeah. Dr. Nick, are you about to say?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, people are putting UX in front of everything.
Yeah, they are.
Right? I mean, it doesn't change it. It's just a label, but unfortunately, people are reading into it.
Jennifer likes the comment that UX had become so sexy that everybody wanted in. I mean, so many things are wrong with that statement, right? But she's right.
But you know, when UX is perceived as something with such a wide horizon, it appeals to so many different audiences, right. All those researchers and all those designers. So it pulled a lot of people in. But I just want to make the point that typically the persona, the personality of a researcher and their core competencies versus a designer are usually quite different.
Yes.
And so, you know, that's where the civil war comes around, both internally within me and within my peer group, is we've got, as I'm the old school consultant, so I'm much stronger in research, but people are expecting everybody to be perfect in both. And I think we just need to acknowledge that you've got strengths and like primary skills and secondary skills, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yes,
and then how important are the primary skills and the secondary skills on the project, right? Because the project may warrant one of those skills at one point in time greater than the other skill. You know, so again, I think it always comes down to economics. In the workplace, I think that economics is the foundation of almost every decision. And if we can't look to leaders within the organization that are business stakeholders and say the implications of your not following this are X, meaning that you could have been here to aspire here, but you're only going to get here. And what's worse is the outcome could be negative and hurt you even greater. Let me look at Eugene. Eugene, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. Good to see your familiar faces in one call. I've been waiting for this moment for a while. Not sure what moment that is, Eugene, but I hope you have it. So I want to go ahead.
Well, I'm going to tap in again about that financial aspect. This an angle of it is that a lot of companies, you take the lack of understanding of what UX is, basically, and I'll just say it, trivializing what UX is, discounting what UX is, and not recognizing the impact that UX can have when you mix that pot of soup up, results in hiring the wrong people a lot of times because they end up thinking everybody's a designer.
Right.
Last week I was just talking about this with someone else. When everything is in caps, nothing's in caps. When everybody's a designer, nobody's a designer. And so that applying that same philosophy. So just sort of wrapping all that up, or trying to up, companies need to be more willing to pay for someone who's going to bring what they really need to the table. And it's much easier said than done. It does boil down exactly as you said to economics, to the point where they don't want to spend the money to bring the person in that they really need.
Right.
They end up they bring the wrong person in. And a lot of those people have a fake it till you make it mindset. There's several problems with that, but they're not going to deliver value. Then the company already doesn't understand what UX is. Then they sour on UX, and then they throw UX out.
So you guys, honestly, I want your comments. One more big question out there or where I see it from somewhat outside, quasi outside, is that whatever problems are happening within the UX domain are caused by UX practitioners.
To some extent, yeah.
Well, let me tell you why.
Certain angle.
Tell you why I say that. Because it would not have gotten to this level if there weren't voices, not just one voice, multiple voices saying that we could do it faster, better, cheaper. right? Or
Yeah.
that if we cut things off here and shave things off there, if we combine things here and do this, it's kind of like building a building that will stand for centuries, for generations, or building something like homes that go up in 3 months. They're expected to come down in 20 years. Or 20 years. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it is the builders, it's the building association, it's what the buyer can afford, all of those things. But at some point, the profession has to stand together to say, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is the business impact that we make. And it is your choice as to whether or not you want to follow that protocol. It's up to the practitioner as to whether or not they follow that protocol. But if you don't, you're going to get, I liken this to a dentist. I'm not going to go to a general dentist to get a crown put in or have a root canal done.
Yep.
Going to still be in tremendous pain, and you're not going to have a long-lasting solution that is sustainable and have the ability to grow your business for the future. For me, that is about buying something once, right?
Yes.
And having it for a long time and something that you can keep using over again. What's it going to take for us to get to that point? What do we need to do to fix this problem of UX dilution?
Yes, and that is exactly my angle. That's exactly why I feel that we
First
could.
of all, do I get you guys? Do I get what you're going through?
Yes.
Yeah.
To me, yeah, that's definitely one angle of it.
These are the conversations I have with other recruiters. And if you're a UX practitioner out there and you're talking to a recruiter and they don't get this, then they're not going to be able to represent you.
They can't. I delivered a talk a few years ago that was specifically for recruiters for UX. And I don't know what happened to that organization. That talk is up on SlideShare as well. How do you as a recruiter optimize your operation in the world of UX? And I gave a whole, I don't know, maybe 20 slides and a bunch of different tips. And the big at the core was it helps if you understand more about UX. To your other point, we are at fault to a degree as a group. And sadly, a lot of UX people are trying this. If you do try to be a voice, sadly, a lot of UX people want to shut that voice down. And they'd rather listen to someone that talks about design thinking. They'd rather listen to someone that talks about shortcutting or microwaving UX careers. They'd rather listen to somebody talking about how you can go and learn how to do UX in 6 months or whatever it is, or someone else out there saying that, oh, I helped 250,000 UX people. If you help 250,000 UX people, why are we in the shape we're in? People should be willing to take a stand. And because we do not take a stand for what's right, because we put ourselves before the discipline, the problem continues.
So how do we get you all how do we fix this? What can we do? Let's think about this as a research case. Right? How do we know the research is there, the data is there, the job descriptions are there, the pricing is, all of that information is there. What do we do to fix this? What is our solution? So, and you don't have to answer that now, but just give us some hope.
Okay, the ultimate answer is people understanding the true value of UX, but we can't just get there straight away. Lee, you said you need to work with recruiters who really truly get UX, and if they don't, they can't represent you. There's a problem with that, in that a lot of the recruiters I work with totally get UX, but their money doesn't come from me. It comes from their clients. And that's the problem, right? They want to do the right thing, a lot of these guys, but they also need to get paid themselves and hit target. So that just sucks. There's a broken mechanic out there right now. And that means a lot of filters are broken or skewed. And so people are passing through filters because there's huge demand and all that stuff. This will make you laugh. On multiple occasions in the past 10 years, I have offered, when I'm working on an e-commerce funnel, on a conversion project, I've offered to work for free, and you pay me a percentage of the uplift that I get you, right? So this is money you wouldn't have had. Okay, and no one, not a single person, has gone with that. because they know that I can make out like a bandit. But then if the company is making £10 million more and I take 1 million of that, that's still £9 million more than you had.
But why would they go with that?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Familiarity.
It's a no risk. It's a no risk thing. I'm saying I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I will work for you for free. I will not get paid until there's an uplift. And when there's an uplift, I'm going to take a chunk of that.
I don't understand why they wouldn't work with that, because most of those same people are working with lawyers. And that's exactly how a lot of lawyers work. Not corporate lawyers, but if they were to take on a case, they get 30% of whatever they bring in. Yeah.
And you know what? If people really understood the value of UX, that might be the operating model for UX practitioners, at least in that market space. Because literally a good UX researcher or a good UX consultant can literally change balance sheets. They can change the monthly, the quarterly numbers. I mean, if you graduated with a data science-y type qualification and became some form of quant analyst, you get paid the big bucks. $200K starting salary, that kind of stuff, right? Big numbers. As a straight fresh out of graduate stuff. User research and psychologists and these types are coming out earning in England not a lot of money, £30,000 to £50,000 a year, given what they know and can do and how little it takes to get them into rock star mode. It doesn't take that much. It just takes some knowledge sharing, some mentorship. But again, you need to invest the money in the head of UX at a proper level, at that kind of, actuarial type level. It's or data scientist, not some kind of marketing exec salary, whatever that is. It doesn't work. And I can only speak for the English market. Most of the really competent UXers I know are all freelancers.
Wow. Because
we can't get jobs that pay even half of what we get earned right now. And so anyone with a clue is a freelancer. That's the truth. And also, Darren, you said you're not afraid of leaving. I had to do that because the first 5 years was sitting out. I don't want my CV, my resume to look bad. I didn't want to look like I was jumping around too much. So I hung on for 12 to 18 months to do the right thing. And it was murder. I never want to do that again.
Yeah.
It was horrible. Nobody should have to go through that amount of mental health garbage of just suffering. You know what I'm saying? It's no way. So now, as a freelancer, if you turn up and they go, "Hi, we'd like you to spend the next 3 months wireframing," you're like, "Yeah, cheers, bye, thanks." That's I have a level of control to be able to choose proper UX, or at least stuff that meets my view of the world, and that I've got the skills for.
So I just want to interrupt here for one comment and one observation on that. At that moment, that's a learning moment for that hiring manager who's asking you to do wireframes. How do you respond to that?
Gosh, there have been so many times when I've had to just ignore. Many of us get misrepresented in interviews. So people misrepresent the job big time, and you'll get there and there's no user centricity and it is a wireframing gig. That's terrible. And so many interviews that I've been in, at least in the UK, although Darren laughing hard.
Yes.
When you get in there and you've actually got a relationship and you start talking to them, well, what about this stuff? Like, oh, that's what we want to get to. It's all very aspirational, but that's not the way it was sold in. So you get in there, and what you try to do is say, look, I'll do it your way, but there's a better way. And then I will, without permission, go ahead and do the research and do my usual UX process. And they see the outputs and they go, holy cow, that's amazing. And then pennies drop, doors open, and we start to move ahead. Or they go, no, do what I say, in which case, we move on again. Or at least I can't help you with that. You want a visual designer. You don't want me. You're asking for the wrong person with the wrong skill set.
Yeah.
I think that helps a lot. Let me get
sorry. I was at a visual design agency 5 or 6 years ago. Long story short, we needed a freelancer. I was the perm. We got a freelancer in. His wireframes was drawing in pencil were just works of art. And I said to him, dude, you're amazing. He said to me, look, I'll be honest with you. He goes, I'm actually an illustrator. I was like, oh, shit. Right? I doubled my day rate by just changing my title to user experience. Double.
Yeah.
Wow, that's true. That's honest. That's honesty. At least he's honest.
Yeah. No, he was a lovely, amazing, creative man. but not a UXer. He's a fantastic creative who was just earning, selling what skills he can do to earn the money. And you can't blame people for doing that. We're all humans. We need better filters.
Yeah.
So let me read Monica's comment. In the UX community, maybe I don't need these. In the UX community, I don't often hear the term human factors engineering, which has been around since the 50s in response to safety issues. Cockpits needed good design so that pilots didn't hit the wrong button at the wrong time. In web, safety has been replaced with financial concerns.
Yeah, I actually, when I talk UX history, I actually go all the way back to, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he helped help optimize the work that was being done on Henry Ford's assembly line. You can trace things that we do today that we call UX back to that. And that same gentleman, that process ended up being turned into what we now know today as the Gantt chart. Toyota did things that we now consider today to be the whole just-in-time process was actually birthed out of what we today practice and refer to as UX. So human-computer interaction or human factors, that is part of today what I like to refer to as the world of UX. It's still UX. We're just calling it something different today.
We repurpose human beings repurpose a lot. Let me read Jennifer's comment. At Nielsen Norman Group's recent report on the state of the industry, quote, although we asked respondents for their job title, we do not know whether their responses were their actual job titles or their own descriptions of their roles. However, it is interesting that combinations like UI/interaction designer, UX/digital designer, and so on are used in some of these titles, possibly reflecting the need to highlight all the responsibilities and skills of the role. Unfortunately, the tendency to fashion new job titles contributes to an already large collection of job titles in the industry. Yes. The vast number of job titles can be confusing, particularly for new recruits, job seekers, and managers. So I think that we've got, UX jobs include ridiculous amounts of coding in my city. Yeah, so let's take the next. We've got 2 minutes left, and I'm going to ask you this question again. What is the one thing, as UX practitioners, as those who represent UX talent, as UX leaders that are holding the responsibility of this domain within their organization, what is the one thing that we can do, gentlemen, to start showing the impact and the implications of user experience to make it a more clearly defined capability in an organization?
Do you want to go first, Darren? I don't mind. Whatever.
Sure. Oh man, that's a toughie because the world is so large.
I'll give you my answer. What you're thinking. I'll go quick, right? So it's kind of a Pricey of what we've already kind of said, right? So number one, we need the people who are hiring the heads of UX to hire better heads of UX. And I'm sorry, heads of UX out there. I've said it. We need better heads of UX who hire better teams. We have these pyramids, which start off really badly, and then everything because they hire in their own image. And if you've got somebody who is very artistic led as a head of UX, they're only going to hire designery types, and that's a problem. So I would say that's number one. Number two, if you have, we've got design. We've got design. All kinds of different design. We don't have enough research. So the number one thing I would say is create a dedicated research team. Have a research at as high as a possible position as you reasonably can in your organization, and hire researchers, but hire them in a way that you're creating a true progression from intern, junior, mid, senior, lead. A proper experiential mentored learning that all starts from the head of the department, not from some kind of community or socialized thing. The quality is too low. That's what I would say. All about research.
One that I would build, let's group those. Add what I'm about to mention. Something I've been really harped on a tremendous deal at the last few organizations I've worked at is the UX maturity. I know it came up earlier in a different light. UX maturity, managing it is huge. if organizations would commit to a sound UX strategy, so that's number one. Companies have no UX strategy. If you don't have, think about Jamie Levy's book on UX strategy. If a company does not have a sound UX strategy, you're simply not going to be successful. So that's number one. And that's going to take what Dr. Nick just said. You need to have a true head of UX, someone who understands or values. And I have seen people who are not UX practitioners lead UX groups successfully. I have seen it. It is rare. I don't advise it, but it can be done. If that's what you've got to work with, then that person at least has to have respect for the discipline and respect for the practitioners. If the person who's in charge does hire in their own image and they're like reeking of cronyism and nepotism and they don't know UX, I have seen that just blow up in the company's face. And that's going to cost that company millions, if not billions of dollars by having that in place. Then when you have the right person in place and you have the right UX strategy, drive UX maturity. There are plenty of models out there, just like there's a bunch of titles out there. You can even look at all the models and devise your own model of UX maturity, but you need to manage it. And it applies. And when I used to be the UX manager for Bosch, and I used to travel over to Europe a lot, back and forth between the States and Europe. And one of the things I did in that automotive aftermarket division was I was responsible for managing the UX maturity. And they said that we had the best division in a company with almost 400,000 employees.
Wow.
Because we made sure that that maturity was sound. And I went a step further. I did something. I'm actually going to write something on this soon, so you'll see it in the not too distant future. Not only the UX maturity level of the organization, I assign UX maturity levels by project, and I assign UX maturity level by stakeholder. That helped me to manage everything. I told that to somebody once, and they said, that's a lot of work. Well, that's a lot of benefits, too. I'm not afraid of work. And UX people today who are trying to microwave their careers, if they're afraid of doing work, they're not going to get anywhere. So to do the work and drive it.
Wow. All right, guys. This has been a little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Physical activity for me. So I can't thank you enough. I think that we got to the root of the problem, right? And I think that is economics driving the UX capability. And we got to the root of the solution, which is leadership and education.
Yes,
as always.
So I think that we've just solved, at least taken a step at getting the solution underway. The question is, where does this begin? It begins in the home, right? It begins where each person sits within their organization to advocate for good research, testing, and design. And that not one of these three is less important than the other, but they're different. Would you agree that that's a sound assessment?
I'm going to add one other little put an asterisk on there. It begins at the individual.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Far too many problems in the UX world at the individual level. Egos, improper goals, a failure. We have a code of ethics for our. You've seen them out there with the different associations. Individuals are not embracing that. And if individuals don't embrace it, it won't happen at the organizational level. You're right. It does need to happen at the organizational level. But people, by person, have to embrace and own up to that accountability that we need to face in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve. We're still a young discipline. We don't have time for people to go out and charter a ship and run off and do their own thing. We can't. We have to be younger.
Darren, we're actually a younger discipline. We've gone backwards since that gold rush. So we were doing great. We had an amazing trajectory. I was really excited.
Yes.
And then it got completely diluted. And we're kind of starting back at square one all over again. Yep. And one last thing, product is another shenanigan, another confound in this mess, because a lot of product are talking about UX things, and you might as well relabel UX as product. If I just relabel myself as product, I'd be an excellent product person. It's just I'm sticking to my UX home ground. But right now they're becoming kind of interchangeable. And take the road mapping bit out, and what's left is UX.
All right, guys. I think that the way to start this is to look at as a little soul searching for all of the UX practitioners and leaders and all that kind of stuff. Let's just start there. But in every interaction that we have, figure out a way to bolster the capability and to strengthen each of the separate segments under UX and make them all important, but not, blended. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. This was an extremely informative and emotional call. And if you hang on at the end, we'll do a quick debrief. And I want to thank our audience for joining. If there are questions that we did not get to or comments, I will make sure that Dr. Nick and the future Dr. Hood are very well aware of them, and they will respond in kind. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Please, we've got to advocate for this. This is not going to be one person's responsibility. This is a community's responsibility to be advocates for quality solutions that impact organizations under the UX domain. So thank you all for making my life easier. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Bye.